reminding folks we're going to be recording this today. Mike had a deep love for history and civics and was an absolute example of what we need in our educators and our community members. And we're dedicating the entire Rhode Island Civic Learning Week to his memory. So before we dive in, we just wanted to give some brief overview of our incredible panelists that we have today. We're going to be actually putting their full bios in the chat in a few minutes because we want to save time to dive into conversation. And really, we're excited to have a conversation today with them about the state of civics in Rhode Island, present and future, and where we are going and why this work is important. So first, we have the Rhode Island Secretary of State, Nellie Gorbea, who is joining us. Secretary Gorbea made history when she became the first Hispanic elected to statewide office in New England in January of 2015. She deeply believes that government should work for people and has promoted increased civic engagement and government accessibility in our state in many ways. Welcome, Secretary Gorbea. Also joining us is Education Commissioner Angelica Infante Green, who is the first Latina and the first woman of color to lead the Rhode Island Department of Education, taking the post in 2019. The commissioner has led many major efforts during that time to reform our K-12 public schools and shared with us just a couple weeks ago when speaking with our coalition how passionate she is about civics and social studies in our schools. Welcome. And then finally, we're pleased to welcome State Representative Greg Amore, who has been in his elected position since 2012. He has served as the Deputy Majority Leader and holds a seat in the Finance Committee, chairing the Finance Subcommittee on Education. And very notably, he championed and led a piece of legislation, a new civics law that passed last July that requires all young people in Rhode Island to experience quality civic education, including student-led project-based civics education. Welcome. So I believe we're going to start with some opening remarks from each of our incredible panelists today. And I'd love to turn it over to Secretary Gorbea to kick us off. Thank you, Secretary.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with all of you. You know, civics is a really near and dear subject to me. And it's funny because I was that kid that when they explained what student government was, actually I was like in 7th grade in Puerto Rico, said, you know, I think I'll do that. You know, it sounds kind of fun and interesting. And lo and behold, here I am, you know, many years later. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this discussion alongside, you know, wonderful people like Commissioner Infante Green and Representative Amore, who are also passionate about civics, and hosted by Generation Citizen, which is an amazing organization. And we're here kicking off Civic Learning Week in Rhode Island. So, you know, I do want to say, though, that I would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the passing of Mike Trophy, who was an incredibly dedicated educator, and his passions and contributions to the advancement of civics education in Rhode Island really made a difference in whole generations of students. My team and I had enormous respect for his commitment to the teaching of civics in our state. And I joined the community of West Warwick and everybody else in saying that he will be greatly missed. You know, we know that one of the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution is the right to vote. And that exercising that right in every election is one of the most important actions that we can take in our democracy. You know, if you don't vote, you're not going to be taken into consideration when decisions are made about your lives, your family, and your future. You know, for the students in the audience, voting means having a say in decisions that affect issues that are really of great importance to your generation. Issues like student loans, housing, climate crisis, the voting is the way in which you are able to say what you want done through the representatives that are elected. And your vote matters at all levels of government. And this is something that I really want to drive home because, yeah, sure, the presidential election gets most of the attention. Remember like the 2021, that got a lot of attention. But your vote has so much more power on issues that directly affect you on a local level. So I want to make sure that when you're all voters, you don't just stay at the top of the ticket, as we say, but at the top of the ballot, that you go down ballot. Down ballot is where you have races for city council, general assembly, races that really have been won or lost by a handful of votes. We have tools at our voter information center, which I hope somebody will put into the chat. It's vote.ri.gov. I give you all permission to go on your phones now and put that into your browser and save it, because vote.ri.gov is what gives an amazing amount of information to eligible Rhode Islanders on how to register and update their information online, and to see who your elected officials are, so that you can have conversations with them about what you want done through government. But voting is not the only way to make your voice heard. And I know that through Generation Citizens, many of you hear of the other ways in which to make your voice heard, which is through, civic participation. Participating in your government can take many, many shapes and forms. It could be a letter or a phone call to your legislator on an issue that, sorry, that was my phone that I didn't put on silent. Let me stop it. It always happens. But participation in your government can take many forms. It can be a letter or a phone call to your legislator to discuss an issue of importance to you. It can be attending a public meeting, which actually can be very, very interesting, or writing a letter to the editor. It can be testifying at a town council meeting. And as a young person, you have just as much of a right to testify, either at town council, city council, or the state house. You can even do it at a committee hearing at the legislature, at the General Assembly. So you can also be civically engaged, just volunteering in your community. And for some boards and commissions, they'll actually welcome having members who are young people as well. So in a government of, for, and by the people, it is the people that are the critical element. Our democracy thrives when people of all ages and backgrounds participate. So it's up to today's leaders, myself included, to make a commitment to civic education as a means of facilitating lifelong civic engagement by all Rhode Islanders. Nobody wants to be a part of a place where you don't really understand how to get things done, right? Well, democracy requires each and every one of us to stay actively engaged and to continue to learn. So I know that I take this commitment very seriously, which is why I'm really proud of the tools and resources that my team has developed during my 7 years as Secretary of State. These are tools that make government more open, accessible, and transparent for Rhode Islanders. Now, I've already mentioned the Voter Information Center at vote.ri.gov. I'm also really excited about our brand new Open Government Center, which just recently launched. That webpage has interactive data tools and resources that will help you participate civically and hold government accountable. It includes tips for testifying at public meetings, how to read proposed legislation. It provides guidance for filing access to public record requests, and also, importantly, a glossary of government terms. So you don't have to create your glossary. We've already done it for you. Go to the website. Our state librarian, Megan Hamlin-Black, will be presenting these tools at a session later this week. We also put a link in the chat to make it easier for you to find. I know that younger voters here have so much potential to shape the world. And I know that Commissioner Infante Green and Representative Greg Amore also believe that as well. And I think that You all know it too. In the 2020 elections, 59% of registered voters, but in 59% of registered voters born after 1997 cast a ballot in Rhode Island. That's almost 60%. It's an incredible recipe for change and a really encouraging sign. I've said many times, civic engagement is a lifelong activity that requires a commitment by all of us to providing access to a healthy civic education. So I want to thank the Rhode Island Civic Learning Coalition, the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, and Generation Citizen for the invitation to be here. And I'm looking forward to the discussion and to the rest of this awesome week.
Thank you, Secretary Gorbea, for those inspiring words. I would love to now pass it over to Representative Amore to share some words for himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. So Civic Learning Week, I can relate to that because for the past 30 years, 36 weeks out of the year have been Civic Learning Week for me. In a public school classroom where I've been honored and privileged to share my knowledge and get into a Socratic back and forth with students who are tremendously interested in how to access their government. And so this week, if you were to walk around East Providence High School and listen in to civics courses, there would be a discussion going on directly related to issues that we are all seeing play out in real time on the news. And the discussion between what an authoritative state is that does not allow full freedom of press as compared to where we live and what we fight for all of the time. And those are the rights that are written into the Bill of Rights. And when we have these real-time events, these catastrophic events, in the case of the Russian invasion into the Ukraine, we have an opportunity to connect the dots for our students. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this panel and my esteemed colleagues in government and education, Secretary Gorbea and Commissioner Infante Green, who are both incredibly hard workers in regard to putting civic learning at the forefront for our students and for our citizens. And what I just mentioned is a perfect example of what we could do with the legislation that we passed last year. And I'm going to use my time to talk about that legislation because I think it's really important to understand what it presents, what opportunities it presents for us. So the legislation requires proficiency, and that's determined by the local school districts in civic education at some point between 8th and 12th grade. But the exciting part of the legislation is the project-based requirement and the connective tissue that we're asking students to unravel between the federal, state, and local level, and how decisions, issues affect them, impact them. And we can see that in a whole host of ways. And what we know as public servants, what we know as elected officials, as policymakers, is that most folks get involved in government one way or the other, or get involved as citizens because something is bothering them. They have been presented with an issue where they feel there is injustice, or they feel there is a situation that could be improved. Well, when it's your turn to act on one of those issues, you have to be able to know how to access government, and you have to know how it works, and you have to be able to effectively lead an effort toward that change. And that's why civic education is so important. That when the time comes, and it comes for all of us, where we get to a point where we stand up and we say, well, enough is enough, or I think I can make a difference here. What do I do next? And this is really so important when it comes to a project-based requirement where students can dig into an issue that impacts them directly and see where that connects at each level of government. And so if I sound excited, it's because I am. It's what I've done for a living for these many years, and it gets students excited. This is not textbook education. That's not to say we don't have materials that support this education, but when we can make things real, when we can bring history, and when we can bring our government alive, when we the people becomes more than words, and it becomes what we do as a people to impact our communities. And there are two key expressions here. The first is that all politics are local. So Secretary Gorbea is absolutely right. You know, things affect us on the local level before they affect us on the national level. We might see more about the national level, but the impact is local. And the second is the great Franklin quote, where we have a republic if we can keep it. And the only way we can keep our republic is if we have an educated citizenry, if we have Americans who understand how their government works, understand what they can do to change that government when it needs to be changed. And that is our entire process, right? It's a flexible Constitution, is a living, breathing document. And these are really exciting concepts in education because they are hands-on. And so I'm thrilled that we're focused on civic education. I thank those that organized the event, Generation Citizen, the Rhode Island Civic Learning Coalition. It's really important, and I think more now than ever before, the foundational principle of public education, and I know we're going to hear from the commissioner soon, one of the foundational principles of public education was to build good citizens. Now, there were ways to do that, whether it be prepare them for the workplace or give them basic knowledge so they can act. And this is incredibly important to the survival of our republic. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled we're having this discussion. I can vouch for Secretary Gorbea's incredible resources that are available to educators across the state. She has done a fantastic job in making those accessible, available, in timing them with certain aspects of the curriculum. And this is just so important. I know we talk a lot about STEAM education, and we talk a lot about preparing our students for the workplace and careers. But in my humble opinion, we cannot do any of that if we do not have a solid foundation in civic education.
Thank you, Representative Amore. Incredible, inspiring, meaningful messages. And I would love to now pass it to the commissioner to share some opening words.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here kicking off Civic Learning Week with two amazing leaders. I have to say that Secretary Gorbea and Representative Amore have been leading the charge for a long time and kind of paving the way for where we are today, which is a very different place than when I first arrived here. And I have to thank Representative Amore, because one of the first things that I asked for was for a social studies person and to really lead the civic engagement work and civic throughout our state. And I'm really excited and grateful for the support and the opportunity. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do here at Rhode. And we take it very serious, our job. And our job is to make sure that students have the knowledge and skills to succeed beyond the classroom. It's not just about the classroom, but where do we go from here? And you heard it from both the two leaders before me, that it really is at a local level, right? So we're finding ways for students to get ready to participate in effective democratic and global citizenship. And that's really important. Sometimes we start in the classroom, but we want it to go beyond the classroom. So for us, that includes hands-on, field-based learning to develop civic insight, understanding of public affairs, and the ability to contribute to the common good, things that you all know. And right now, we need to do more of that. I think so many of our students can serve as examples to adults statewide. And I'm always inspired by the students because they're always asking the difficult questions that we as adults sometimes shy away from. Not anyone on this panel though. So our future leaders at the federal and state and local level is who we're preparing right now. So that's why we're working to ensure students have access to high quality civics education. This is something that I'm really excited about, and we're hiring our first social studies specialist. I can't tell you how exciting that is. And in September, and you heard about our representative's role in all of this, but in September, I was proudful and excited to join the governor to sign into legislation the civic education proficiency requirement for all public school graduates. So right now, Rhode Island is reviewing and revising its social studies standards. Yay! That means what you're going to learn in the classroom. Over the past several months, Rhode has worked to develop a draft organizational structure and discipline areas for these new standards. Civic and government is one of the 4 disciplines which are the standards are being organized. So these are going to be the big buckets as we look at all the other aspects of history, as we look at history, geography, and economics. So it can't be devoid. The draft standard factor in feedback from more than 900 survey respondents. That's really exciting. It's one of the places that we've gotten the most feedback. In the next phase of the work, in the next several months, Rhode will develop a draft content framework, identify topics of study for K-12 social studies, and we look forward to engaging with the community and educational stakeholders about these standards. This is where the secretary was talking about where you can engage. Like, we're putting this out, but it's your voice that finally creates these resources in our world. So we're seeking broad input as the next school year begins. And before we move on, I have 2 more things that I want to share with you, which are really, really important. So we had an excellent turnout at district events statewide to share your voice, and in some cases vote on how schools will spend federal COVID relief dollars or ESSER funds. You were part of that. And that's very exciting for us because we don't just say this is what we're going to spend the money on. We need, obviously, the community's voice. Is this what's important? And you have a voice in this process. And another great opportunity for civic engagement is our secondary regulations out right now for public comment. So please, please, please give us your comment. We are reimagining high school experience and adopting readiness-based graduation requirements. What does that mean? That means that civics is part of what we're saying you need to have in order to graduate. That's really exciting. That's a whole new universe for us. Our team built this proposal after months of conversations with students, teachers, school administrators, community members, and other stakeholders. And we set the goal of this being the most commented on regulations in the history of Rhode Island. And that is really part of the work that we have to do. The public comment period will be between 45 to 60 days long and includes at least 4 public hearings. So please, if you are not part of that and you have not given back feedback, please look at this because this is what's going to frame and what these regulations mean, that this is what our diploma will mean, that every student has had world languages, that every student has had civics, that every student has actually in our state has really had financial literacy. So our diploma has to mean the same thing everywhere we go in the state, not just in certain districts. So we want students to know the power is limitless and that they can help shape what we're doing here in Rhode Island and in our country as a whole. But for that, we have to really be engaged. Once again, I am really impressed by the work that everybody here has done, and I really feel honored to be in a panel with 2 of the most inspirational leaders that we have right now as we move forward. So thank you all, and I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. We're actually going to keep you up here because we actually know about a scheduling conflict where you have to leave early. So we're going to enter a phase now of just really directed questioning for each of you, starting with you, Commissioner, to dive in a little bit more to the incredible things you're sharing with us. And really just to go even deeper, I'm feeling personally energized about the policy reforms that are happening, from the civics law to the standards revision to the high school graduation civics requirements. It's very exciting. And I'm wondering how you think, or what investments and work needs to be done in the long term over the next 5 years to really ensure these policies are implemented equitably, knowing that we have an inequity in access that affects students of color, English learners, and low-income students more greatly. So what work, sort of once the policies pass and are in place, do we need to do as a state to make them happen to high quality?
Yeah, well, I think part of our role here at Ride, we've sort of changed our role from compliance to support. We still have both. And I think part of our role is to ensure that what we said is going to be in the classroom is, that we create the tools that teachers can utilize, and that we actually monitor what's happening in the classroom and bring it alive, right? Bring it to all the other districts. One of the things that we learned during the pandemic was the deep desire that all the kids have to work across the state. You mentioned some of the most marginalized populations in our state, and students from all over wanted to be able to work together to try to create solutions. So our role is to facilitate that, to make sure that students understand government, what levers they can use to better support the things that we are saying are important and should be in our classrooms. And their voice matters and counts. And we expect that we will be able to report back to everyone how things have been put in place and where it's working and where it needs more support.
Fantastic. And one final question before I know you need to jump off is just around what you mean by quality civic education. And I'd just love to highlight that in the standards revision process, RIDE centered, culturally responsive and sustaining curriculum, and just commending you for that. But maybe could you share with the audience a little bit about what that is? And there's a lot of different ways to define quality civic education, as we're seeing across the country right now, a vibrant conversation. So what does that mean to you?
So quality civic education really inspires students to engage with their communities beyond the classroom, right? If it's limited to the classroom, then we have not done our job. I think. I'm sorry. Can you turn that off, please? Thank you.
Their cameras and their audio.
Okay, sorry about that. That's my next meeting. Apologize. So the work during the course that inspires them to be civically minded individuals takes the ideas of school leaders that work to improve their communities. So part of what we're saying is that we have to keep track of the work that we're doing and be very public about it. I believe that students could benefit from a senior project, right? With a civics component, or even better, consistent school-wide civic engagement. And that's what the expectation is, that our students can kind of lead the way, not kind of, should be able to lead the way once we're giving them the right resources and tools.
Thank you so much. And I know you have to jump, but just
I'm so sorry.
And we're really looking forward to continuing working with you and keep the conversation going. Thank you. Great, bye-bye. So now we're gonna move to Secretary Gorbea, who really comes to us with this big macro view of the work you do, bringing civic engagement to the whole population in Rhode Island. And really digging in, what do you consider some of the root causes to voter and civic disengagement? Why do we even have to address this issue to begin with?
Well, let me start by saying that while American democracy is amazing in many ways, it was structured but the structures of voting and of the government itself have been much slower in changing. And so American democracy, unlike other democracies, if you look at other countries, American democracy is much more complicated. In Rhode Island, as small as we are, there are 4 different kinds of municipal government. So if you move from Woonsocket to Providence, you change the bottom third of your ballot. And so nobody really likes to do things that you're not comfortable or don't really know, right? Nobody likes to do something that they feel stupid doing. So it's not as simple as people will say, well, voting doesn't matter, or people don't want to vote because they don't care. No, we have not done a good enough job of giving the tools in schools for students to learn. That's what we're doing now, thanks to the Civics Act that Rep. Amore and many others passed in the General Assembly. But then there's other causes that might lead to that. And we've worked during my term in office to figure this out. And in fact, the Knight Foundation has done a really terrific set of research around this. Knight is like a knight in shining armor, KNIGHT. They found that non-voters generally lack faith in elections and believe that their votes don't matter. And then they feel intimidated by government processes, which is what I was just talking about. So, that's why I've worked really hard to demystify voting, especially for new and young Rhode Islanders. For example, when we purchased new voting machines, I offered them to schools, and my elections team developed a program for high schools to hold student body elections or any other kind of elections with real ballots. In Central Falls, they use them to do a participatory budgeting exercise where the students at Central Falls High School decided, what they could use $10,000 of the municipal budget for. They came up with the questions of what were the alternatives, and then they had a real election. It was great. Now, we've also used memes, videos, and animations. If you're not on the Insta account of RI Votes, I recommend it. And we are still taking memes. We will take nonpartisan, clean memes that are wickedly funny about voting or voter registration, and you will be broadcast nationally. Anyway, we have that. We've got videos. We've got animations that really convey the message in a more lighthearted way. I always say voting should not be a pop quiz. Vote.ri.gov gives you all the information you need to make your voice heard in every election. So go ahead, get informed, and be a voter.
Thank you so much. And kind of diving even deeper to this question of voter disengagement, do you see differences across demographics, across geography in Rhode Island, or generations, age differences, and what groups in Rhode Island are more or less civically engaged and participating in elections and beyond?
Yeah, so I'll give an example. So historically, people have always said that it's seniors, older voters that actually have the highest voter turnout. And that has been true. But in Rhode Island, we're seeing some very interesting shifts since I've been Secretary of State. For example, in the 2020 election, we saw the highest voter turnout from the baby boomers, right? That's to be expected. They were the seniors, 77%, followed by Generation Xers, people like me, 65%, and then millennials, 49%, right? So 77, 65, 49. So yes, older Rhode Islanders vote more frequently. But what was really exciting is that the next generation of Rhode Islanders, Generation Z, which I believe you're all a part of, saw a turnout of 59%. That was 10 points higher than millennials that are older than they are. So younger Rhode Islanders turned out because they wanted to have a say in the direction of the country and the state. Now, presidential elections have usually higher turnout. It has to do with the fact that everywhere you go, national media is covering the election, right? Nobody covers a special election in the town of North Kingstown for sewer bonds, for example, like you do a presidential, or even what we call the off presidential ones. Like this year, we have a very important statewide election where you will be deciding on congressional representatives, as well as your state executive branch and the legislative branch, along with a lot of people at the local level. So we need to make sure that there's high turnout from every generation in every election. And I'm hoping that all of you, because you're Generation Citizens people, will take that really seriously and help us, because it turns out peer pressure really does work. So I'm hoping that you'll all, start some peer pressure to make sure that we get young people voting at a very young age. It's proven that if you vote at an early age, you become a lifelong voter and a lifelong participant in our civic process.
Thank you so much. And it's inspiring and exciting to hear about the voting record for the youngest generation and how that is surpassing us millennials. So thank you for sharing more about that. In addition to the awareness raising among individuals and getting them the resources they need, which is so critical to participate, are there other structural changes that government could do to do a better job at creating greater and more equitable access to civic engagement, whether it be voting or, you know, engaging in issue-based politics?
Yeah, absolutely. And the pandemic in a way forced us into, you know, a broader world, right? It forced us to do public meetings by Zoom and other platforms. And that's really important. We now have to figure out what are the rules of the road to maintain this kind of open process and open access going forward. And it's not as simple as having the technology, having the public meeting online, and that's it. My office also has the state archives. Now we've got to decide if somebody wants to see the records, the minutes, if you will, of that meeting, how do they do that? Is it only a paper process, or do we now keep recordings? Recordings take a lot of space and bandwidth. How do you make sure that that is kept over time? Representative Amore is running for Secretary of State. I'm sure he'll figure it all out because I'm almost done here. So, but those are important questions of structures that we need to change. On the voting side, I'm very excited about the Let Rhode Island Vote Act that is being proposed right now in the General Assembly. And I urge all of you to learn more about it and to testify in favor of it, because it basically puts into law processes that we used during the pandemic that work for people. It worked for people to be able to send in their mail ballots without having to find two witnesses who we have no clue who they are, or have to get their oath envelopes signed by a notary. And now I know I'm getting a little bit technical, but you know, things like that, or having same-day voter registration instead of having this 30-day time period in which nobody can register to vote. Most people think about voting the week before the election. Well, sorry, you can't do it because you moved and you didn't re-register, or you just aren't registered. Right now, that's the situation in our state. We need to change these antiquated structures that made sense at a time of horses and carriages and other playtimes, and bring it into the 21st century.
Thank you so much. And I think this might be a good moment to transition over to Representative Amore, and we'll come back to you, Secretary Gorbea, in a little bit. So thank you. But Representative Amore, you know, you have such a unique perspective being an educator and a state representative for so many years. So I'd just love to sort of hear about your why behind introducing the Civics Literacy Act and being this advocate for civic education. Why does it matter to you?
Well, I think directly what I was becoming concerned with was education had moved into a testing culture. And in a testing culture, we focus on two subjects. We focus on literacy and mathematics. And what I saw happening, and I saw it with my own students who would come to me as 9th graders or 10th graders and engage in civic education really for the first time. And that's because a lot of the focus in the elementary level and even the middle school level was on moving test scores. And because that focus was school centric and then district centric, a lot of the civic education that we did in the elementary level, we were no longer doing. We were bypassing it for what we believe to be, and I don't question the intention of this, but we believe to be ramping students up in both math and literacy. What we failed to do is realize we could do both at the same time. But we did, and what got left off the table a lot of times what was traditionally a part of the elementary and middle school curriculum that dealt with civics, basic structure, basic government structure. The other thing we know, as an educator, I've seen it, you know, the modern world is difficult for parents. They're working sometimes 2 jobs. There's not a structured dinner time. And I think when you're of a certain generation, you know, you kind of learned a lot about how government worked and what government was about through dinner table conversations and through it being passed down from generation to generation. But we don't see as much of that anymore because, as Secretary Gorbea said, the world has changed and we have to change with it and offer those opportunities. So, directly, those are things that concern me. And then we've had and again, rightfully so, we've had a real focus on STEAM education, STEM education in particular. And I was concerned that we would start getting lost in trying to create students who would then serve companies instead of creating a more well-rounded student who would serve as good citizens who could then also serve as good workers. And so all of this combined led me to believe, especially when we started diving into curriculum across the state, we started realizing, wow, we have such a disparity of curricula, and we have some things that we assumed to be true that were not, like there were civic courses, sole civic courses, and there were not in many districts. And to me, combine that with what I believe is really a lack of civic education across the board, not just with young people, but across the board. And so it inspired me to really work hard on the legislation that we're talking about here. Not only that, but to work hard to make sure that social studies remains a vibrant part of the curriculum in our schools. And I know this because it's just a fact. The social studies teachers are the most popular teachers in every school. So we should really leverage that and work with it so that we have a curriculum. And I want to talk about this because this is important. You had asked prior to this, what Commissioner Infante Green, what can we do to advance this legislation? Professional development is essential. We need to invest in professional development for our teachers to get hands-on training in how to engage students and how to work these project-based requirements into their district, because it looks different in Situate than it does in Providence, as we've seen, right? Kids are socially engaged normally when there's a social justice issue before that. But once they become socially engaged, and you heard Secretary Gorbea say this, once you're engaged, you stay engaged. The issues might change, but you'll be engaged. So when we see thousands of young people out in the street demonstrating after George Floyd's death, we need to take advantage of that and say, okay, there's much more. There's much more, and here's how you access government, and here's what you can do to change the makeup of your school committee. Here's what you can do to push curriculum changes, and these are things that we need, that hook, that introduction, and most of the time that is a social justice issue that grabs the attention of our young people, of our students. And that's where we as teachers, as educators, need to say, okay, let's open this door wider. There's much more here.
Thank you for those comments, and thinking about specifically the supports for educators that are needed over the next 5 years. From my perspective, we're really asking them to do a lot here. We have a new standard and framework that's rolling out. We're asking them to lead in project-based experiential ways of which they may not have experienced in the past. So what investments do you think the state, school districts, and teachers need to be making in the next few years to be able to do that really important but challenging work?
Well, we have requirements now for professional development that exist through Rhode and through most districts. One of the things we can certainly do is change the way we deliver those requirements and let social studies teachers choose their training rather than having a one-size-fits-all professional development for a district or a school. If I could use the state archives in some way for a professional development on political cartoons that could be led by one of our current social studies teachers or one of the professors at Brown or Rhode Island College or URI or any of the great institutions we have here, that is how you get a teacher excited, and that's how you get them to implement what they've learned into their classrooms on a daily basis. And we have to make that shift. Now that costs money. We're asking teachers to do a lot, as you've said, and so we need to provide opportunities for them to go do this, to fulfill the requirements. But there is an investment that both the district and the state needs, and I've been advocating for a long time that we need to put the line item back in the Department of Education's budget that requires a certain percentage for professional development for all teachers, not just social studies teachers. I think there are ways to create a public-private partnership here in regard to civic education, where we can expand those opportunities, and I think we can create partnerships with our colleges and universities to do the same. But Ariel, you're right on point. You're asking folks to make a shift, and many of our teachers have already done so when it comes to project-based learning. But there are some teachers who need that support, and just for them to see a lesson, and if we can give them access to a good lesson in front of a class that mirrors their class, well, that goes a long way toward meeting that goal. And it's there's an investment required here. You know, if I was in charge fully of the state budget, that would be a line item. We're going to build schools first, and we're going to fill them with good, solid curriculum materials, and then we're going to do PD. And it's a small pie, and we're trying to do the best we can with it. But we need professional development to support our teachers. And just one more point here, and the secretary knows this well. We're now in a situation where, on top of all the requirements that teachers have and the duties they have during their day, and what they do to prepare at home, we have them under attack in many quarters for imaginary curricula, and for what appears to be a political agenda that ends up targeting hardworking folks who are following the standards, who are asking their students to think. I mean, when did it become a problem for teachers to ask their students to have to take in multiple perspectives? And that's scary to me, because it's hard to bring people in the profession now, and it's hard to keep people in the profession now. So when it becomes this toxic atmosphere, especially for social studies teachers who are facing the brunt of this criticism in regard to critical race theory, et cetera, I worry about that.
Thank you for bringing up that important issue, which is happening on a national scale. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for Rhode Island to really lead in what quality, culturally relevant, and responsive civics curriculum is, and show that it can be done and it should be done in ways that aren't violating people's rights, et cetera. So
and earlier, we have the advanced placement civics and government course is a really good course, and it has sound curriculum and great support. And a key element of that course is multiple perspectives, right? A key element of that course is viewing this issue through the lens of fill in the blank. Those are key elements of that course that allows our students to think. We should be able to take that curriculum and those aspects of it and move it down the line. You know, you adjust it toward the grade level, and you adjust it toward the standards, and you adjust it toward the capabilities of the students. But those are tried and true civic education and social studies education methodology. That's what we do, and that's what we want. I want my son or daughter to come home and ask me, "Hey, Dad, my social studies teacher today said that Social Security was a Ponzi scheme. What do you think of that?" Well, I'm going to tell her what I think of it, but I'm also going to say, now it's time for you to research a little bit, and it's time for you to push back a little bit. And let's see if we can't get a dialogue going here. That's healthy. That's really healthy.
Absolutely. So, I think I'd love to bring Secretary Gorbea back in and really ask you both a closing question, which is aims to really center the role of youth in this work as incredibly important stakeholders and actors, and really potentially share how you see youth as important in this movement for civic education, civic engagement, and a kind of final word of advice or call to action you have for them as a primary audience today, related to the work we're trying to do together. And maybe Representative Amore, we could start with you and ask Secretary Gorbea to close us out.
Well, it's interesting to me that one of the only areas where we don't get feedback from our clients is in education. And one of the most enlightening things that I could do every year was at the at the semester period was give my students, and of course I have high school students, so it's much easier to do, give them a survey and ask them, what is it that worked? What is it that didn't work? What are you excited about? What do you want to explore more? And so we should be doing that at all levels. We should be asking our students, what is it that excites you? Because we can make connections. I mean, we can do universal suffrage over the course of 200 plus years and make those connections that they're interested in on their level. And so I think that's really the key. A place at the table, as many times as we can survey them as possible, and the ability for them to have, and we do this in East Providence, and I'm sure they do it in many communities. We have a member of our student body who is the liaison to our school committee, who brings these messages, the message from the student body and student government to our school committee unimpeded. We in our SIT teams under the new legislation that Commissioner Infante Green talked about, we have a place at the table at the middle school and high school level for students to be involved in the school improvement teams and involved in these discussions to engage, and not only engage, but make the students part of the process. So, my advice to all students at all times is, is follow what excites you. I can't say you have to be interested in civic education, but I can say you have to be interested in your community. And if you're interested in your community and you're interested in making a difference in your community, even if it's a small difference, because citizenship and the responsibilities are well beyond what we teach, right? Helping a neighbor shovel a walkway is citizenship. And so we try to get them excited. And I would say, find something that's a passion and follow it and explore it. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't be part of the process. We have a 20-year-old school committee member in East Providence who was a former student of mine who's had a great impact. He ran for office, defeated an incumbent, and I assume will win again this next term.
Thank you so much. Secretary Gorbea.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, it's been a pleasure to listen to Rep. Amore because we share so much of this passion for young people getting involved, because it is the future. It will benefit our state. Our best public policy decisions in government come when there's a diversity of opinions, perspectives, and backgrounds around the policymaking table. And we can't be afraid of that. We have to embrace it, be respectful, and live to the true ideals of this country, which are about individuals having a collective, shared future, right? It's not one guy, a king or a queen deciding for all of us. It's we all getting involved in stuff. And so if you think, well, you're not so interested about government, think again. Are you interested in the arts? Because the lack of investment from the public sector in the arts is due to the fact that people have not come up and said, the arts are important to me. I want there to be public funding for the arts. If you want, a particular kind of thing taught in your schools or subject, there's a channel for that through the school committee. So there's so many things. If you're interested, anything you're interested in, government has some sort of role in it, especially your local and state government. So my call to action is, as Rep. Amore said, find that passion and get involved and make sure there's a seat at the table, because just like you, there are others who are silently thinking the same thing, but they just need somebody to put it out there. And so, and then as you get older and you're eligible to vote, be a voter, but also encourage others around you to participate. Don't just talk about the elections every 2 to 4 years. Encourage others, be that positive upstander that encourages others to participate in whatever way they can, whether it be by testifying or by actually voting. And for those of you who are 16 years old, if you're 16 years old and a resident of Rhode Island and you're a US citizen, you can pre-register to vote. And that means that you're automatically registered on the day you turn 18. So between 16 and 18, make sure you're registered or pre-registered. You can actually work at the polls and get some money for working at the polls if you do that. And so, have a say in your government, be involved, get others to understand, explain things to others about how it is that government happens. There's a lot of ignorance right now in our society. And I know that your generation can change things. I have great faith in your ability to help us turn this country around for the better.
Thank you for those wonderful words. I am just honored to be with you today, be with these incredible civic leaders who are doing important, meaningful work in our communities and working alongside youth and educators and community members to do so. We are in an exciting time in the state of Rhode Island in the world of growing civic education and civic engagement statewide. And it is strong leadership like yours that has gotten us here to this date, along with so many community members. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to the broader audience for tuning in today for the first of many really inspiring workshops that will be happening this week. Please, please, please check out them. Find another one that inspires you. There are 2 this evening that are youth-led, co-hosted with Arise, that are wonderful. There's an opportunity for teachers and students to tune in with Justice Sotomayor on Wednesday, which is incredible, for just Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York students, as the Civic Learning Week is actually being run across 3 states. So lots of exciting stuff. Please check it out. And again, thank you for being a part of this important discussion, which will be ongoing, and we look forward to the work ahead. Thank you all and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.